stand-up is it's great. It's, you know, the audience trains the comedian as much as the comedian is, you know, leading the audience. It's a wonderful thing. I advise everybody to try it once if you have the stamina to do it.
Not
Yeah.
me. Okay.
Yeah.
Other people.
But so I'd like to know a little bit about your journey. You know, maybe I'm not sure where a good starting place would be, but let's go back to maybe smicha. You know, when you were in smicha, how did you take to the public speaking and the homiletics? Was that something that you found yourself drawn to, or was it trepidatious for you? How did you?
So I've always been comfortable public speaking. I was the kind of person who was, you know, chosen in color warring camp to say the Dvar Torah, or, you know, youth Shabbos in shul to be the one to speak. So I never shied away from speaking publicly. I found the public speaking classes, at least in YU, to have been tremendously helpful. I guess the thing that made the biggest impression on me and the most change was when I had to watch myself after being videotaped. Professor August, I don't know if he was still there, Olav Shalom, he was incredible, Gerald August, and he used to video us, and we had to take the cassette out of the recorder, go into another room, put it into the VCR, if anybody knows what these things are, and watch ourselves and critique ourselves. And that was, you know, when you suddenly all the and things like that you were denied that you were really saying, or the way that you presented yourself, you know, the video, you know, doesn't lie. And that was incredibly transformative for me, just to be able to see that and him to point things out and then to show you on you know, without you being able to deny it. I gained tremendously from that. Really, it was very, very, really, wow. Very, very special.
What did it particularly help you with? Was it the filler words? Was it the?
Yeah, most of these filler words, sounds, delivery, and the like. Structure, less so. I don't have, even now, I know, you know, some rabbis will have, you know, their outline and they'll have an opener and, you know, 3 questions and a story. I'm not like that. I have no set structure that I go to. I sort of feel it out, and you know, week by week, I assume that if somebody was looking at it objectively, they could probably find certain common denominators. You know, that's human nature. But I was never drawn to, it has to be, you know, a hook at the beginning, and you have to start with a joke, and you have to ask a question, and it didn't appeal to me in that way.
Yeah. So that was the public speaking, and then I know they break it out into 2, right? There's the public speaking and the homiletics.
Yeah, the homiletics I was not as drawn to as the public speaking. The homiletics was much more structured. I gained a lot, and that gave me a lot to think about. But I also, it was a little bit too, at least the way I was taught, it was a little bit too rigid for me.
Too formal.
And I needed to learn from my mistakes,
for
better or worse.
Yeah. So where did you start off from there? Where was your first shteller?
So I've been in Bnai Yeshurun in a variety of different roles for the last 15 years. It's the only place that I've been. I started there as, I think it was called assistant to the rabbi, then assistant rabbi, and then associate rabbi. For a little while I was the interim rabbi. I've been there in different gigs, but I've always been there, and it's been the only place that I've been, and it's been incredible. And certainly when you're speaking to the same audience every week, so you get a feel for the crowd, and it definitely helps you prepare as opposed to, you know, having to go somewhere else. But you also see over time, you know, you look back at the old notes, and you're like, "Ooh, I really said that." You know, what was I thinking in presenting that? And you can feel the growth process.
Yeah. And so when you say you speak every week, are there a couple of minyanim? Because I know
we have 5 or 6 minyanim every Shabbos. So I have the opportunity almost every week to speak. You know, sometimes one of us will take all the slots, or we'll divide up differently. But almost every single week I have the opportunity to speak.
Got it. And so what were those first couple of years like for you? Was it hard to come up with stuff every week?
I think it was hard to come up with stuff. I think I was a little bit trying to fit into the box of the different things that I had learned in homiletics and from hearing other speakers, and tried to be a bit more rigid in how I did it. And I don't know if it's like this in most shuls. I don't think it was like this in the shul that I was growing up, but our shul people are very open to giving commentary on the rabbi's speech afterwards. Not necessarily bad. Most times, actually positive. But I was never, I never was in a shul growing up where everybody felt every Shabbos they had to give it. Rabbi, that was your best speech ever. Like, what do you think about last week? It was never like that. We are very comfortable in our shul, giving feedback, and I gained from it. And there was also the times when there were people that I trusted that gave me constructive criticism. I was working alongside Rabbi Przansky, who's an incredible orator, and he would sit in, especially at the beginning sometimes, and give me feedback as well. And I definitely gained from that.
What was that like? Did you feel, maybe intimidated is too strong of a word, but I guess such a strong personality and such a strong tone, a voice. Did you feel like you kind of were in a shadow?
Maybe a little bit at the beginning, but over time I kind of realized that the area in which he was most outspoken was mostly the area of the arena of politics, which doesn't interest me in the slightest. It's not what I ever viewed the role of a rabbi being. And that's not to be critical of the rabbis that think that is an important part, but for me and my rabbanis and my goals in being able to learn with people and teach people and hopefully inspire people, it wasn't on the radar screen. So it was almost apples and oranges.
Got it. So what was your process back then, and how has it changed over the years?
It definitely started a lot earlier in preparation, which probably is not something which should have changed. But I guess the realities of life are such. I think I spent a lot more time trying to find the supplemental material and trying to find a story and trying to find that psychological study or something which would make the information more palatable to people. And I think over time I realized that when I have those materials, that's great, and if I don't, that's fine too. I'm a big believer that the Torah speaks for itself. And the number one question that I ask myself every Shabbos is this something that I would want to hear? And if it's not something that I would want to hear, then why am I getting up there and assuming that anybody else wants to hear it? And I found that sometimes I'm like, you know what? I don't know that anybody really wants to hear what I'm preparing right now. It might be nice and it's technical and things like that, but it doesn't. If I'm coming to shul and this is my opportunity to learn on Shabbos, and not everybody has an opportunity to learn the rest of the day, I'm not sure that this is what I would want to hear. And put it on the shelf and start again.
And what are some of your go-to resources for Torah? Like where do you look?
It's definitely changed. It's definitely changed over time. I like to pick up often some of the more modern svarim and not finish reading them. I enjoy getting the question or seeing what's bothering them or a medrash that I might have seen, and then closing it and seeing what else is out there. Whether that's Rav Volbe's Shiurei Chumash, Rav Pincus, Shemin HaTov from Rabbi Weinberger's. That's how his brother was actually, and in many of his relatives davened in the shul, so they gave me a copy of the Svarim when I started. And just nice, the Sfas Emes, different divrei Torah that I felt like gave me a good starting place, and then I could work on developing it on my own. And again, sometimes I would read the whole thing. I'm happy to to quote, and I don't believe that you need to come up with your own chiddush, your own knech every single week, and then go back to the Rishonim. The Rishonim, if you can stick to a Rashi and develop a Rashi or a Ramban, I think it's important for people to realize, first of all, how rich those sources are, and there's nothing like the Rishonim speaking for themselves.
Yeah. And so what is your goal with the drasha? When you how do you know when you found something, besides the fact that you want to hear it? How do you know that this is the thing that you're going to talk about?
It's a good question. Usually I sort of have a feeling of excitement when I see it. If I'm not excited when I see something, then I don't think I'm going to be able to give it over well. To me, the most important part, again, there are some people who can use their humor, things like that. I'm not a particularly funny person, so I'm not going to bank on that. I don't think I'm the best storyteller in the world. I'll use stories sometimes. I think I tell them fine, but I don't think anybody's coming to hear me tell stories for 15 minutes or 45 minutes in a longer slot. But I think when you can be passionate and speak with excitement about what you are presenting, I think that really resonates with people. It makes it very, very real. And that's really what I try to bring to it. It's not something that I can get excited about, which doesn't always have to mean that there's a takeaway. I think that was part of the homiletical model. You have to have your drasha, and then there has to be a takeaway. And I always did that at the beginning, and then after a while, I'm like, why? Why can't it be? And I spoke about, I don't remember, maybe it was Rabbi Muskin. It was one of my senior, mentor colleagues that I think I bumped into at a wedding. I was like, do you have a takeaway from your drasha every single Shabbos? He goes, no. Sometimes you just teach a nice piece of Torah, and that also was valuable. But if it's not something that I feel excited about or that I can get excited about, then I try to avoid it.
Mm-hmm. And so let's say at a week where you're just teaching the Torah and you're excited about it, and is it just a 10 to 15 minute
Dvar Torah as opposed to a sermon? Occasionally, not frequently, but occasionally it will be that.
Mm-hmm. And you find that that's for the people that you're speaking to, that works. That's they.
I think that works for occasionally. I don't think that would work if I did it every single week, but I think once every few months teaching as long as it's interesting. If it's just getting up there and reading a Rashi, I don't think. But I think sometimes people are just excited to see the process and I can try to connect to something at the end, but not necessarily a takeaway. But a nice idea, or there should be there could certainly be inspiration, while at the same time not necessarily being Lamaisa, you should go ahead and do, X, Y, or Z.
Sure. And so what about the other weeks? So the weeks when maybe there is a takeaway or there is a lesson to be applied. Do you ever go into it with wanting to leading with the takeaway or
rarely?
Yeah.
Rarely. I try not to, but there definitely are weeks. I usually try to go in with a blank slate and sort of see where things take me. But there are definitely weeks where I have something on my mind, whether that's something which is happening in the world or whether it's just I think we could use a little chizuk in a certain an area. Attendance at shiurim has been a little bit down, or talking has been a little bit up during davening, or things like that, or we're introducing. New Chesed initiative or something like that. Occasionally I do start with the end, but I really try not to. I feel like it comes out better when the end comes naturally from the Torah, as opposed to I need to get there and I need to figure out how it is that I'm going to get there.
Well, what happens when there is, let's say there is an end, but it for some reason the end may feel weak to you. Let's say the Dvar Torah is great, but there's not really that much of it. There is a takeaway, but it's maybe the takeaway is not such a chiddush, or the takeaway is not such a strong takeaway. But the Dvar Torah was. So, do you in those weeks leave off the takeaway, or do you try to pump up the takeaway?
If I'm not if I can't get excited at the takeaway, I would leave it out. I would leave it out. Try to maybe a one-line inspirational something or other without something practical. But I think it becomes almost burdensome for people to think that every week they're going to have to come out and now I have my assignment, for this week I need to do, A, B, or C. I'm sure there are people that think otherwise, but that's, that's my perspective.
Interesting. Yeah. So you lead with the Dvar Torah. That's the kind of North Star, and then develop it, take it where it goes.
Yeah. And even the opening, if I have something which can be a lighter type of opening, I'll do it. But most weeks not. Most weeks it's a pasuk in the parsha, something about the parsha, and we open with the Kriyas Torah.
Right. So tell me about attention spans. How has that changed since 2008? In your experience,
reduced. I try very, very hard to come in between 10 and 12 minutes. I try not to go over 12 minutes. At that point, unless it's one of those weeks when I'm just telling stories, which I'll get back to in a moment, I find that by then the crowd is lost. So I think less than 10 minutes. It's hard to get across what you want to say, and I think people can listen. Once you get above 12 or so, I feel like you're fighting an uphill battle. You really better have something really, really good to say to justify, standing up there for longer than that. I find that almost always I can finish that in 12 minutes. The exception, though, and this was the way Rabbi Brzezinski did it and taught from the beginning, and I've stuck with this, is the Yomim Noraim. The Yomim Noraim, people, I think, come to listen. And I wouldn't fill it in with just for the sake of being longer, but I would generally fill it with more material and come in closer to 18 minutes or so, and not be nervous on the Yomim Noraim.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so since you brought it up, tell me about the story weeks.
So the story weeks are usually when I don't intend for it to happen, but something happened. Whether it's things usually happen with my wife, and then something happens with her, and then I give that over as a story. But she just, some people are just like that. Stories happen to them. If it's a week like that, every so often I'll have a week when I'll come home, or before I go to shul, I'll tell my wife, like, I don't have so much content this week. I've got a few really good stories, but not so much content. I'm almost embarrassed, to be getting up there to say it. And inevitably I'll come home or she'll come to show later and she'll be like, people said that was your best speech ever. And I'll be like, it's depressing. I said, I didn't go to, I didn't study in smicha and sit and learn to be able to tell stories. But sometimes it works. And if it's the right mix, it definitely inspires people. There is a place for stories. There's no question about it. I think it does help. I just don't think putting in the token story is ma'akev, and that you need to stick it in order to check off the box. I did my story. I did my I did this. If it works, I think it can be very, very powerful. I find them more powerful if you stick them somewhere in the middle or towards the end, where you might be losing people's attention as opposed to opening with it, and that buys you a little bit more time to come to your conclusion.
Yeah. So what kind of stories would you tell about your family? Are they
So I've told stories that have gotten some family members upset, and now I've learned from that. When I'll give the example because I've already done it, but I have 6 kids, 2 boys and 4 girls. I think it was Erev Sukkot, and I guess my wife had promised them that she was going to take them for a manicure, and we had a lot of people coming for Yontif, and it was not shayach. So I said, okay, I don't know what's involved. I said, I'll take them. So I took them to the place, and I told my oldest daughter, just tell everybody what to do. And I sat on the side with, I forgot what sefer I was using at the time to prepare for Yontif, and I wrote my drasha. So I had paper, and again, I used to write everything by hand and not on computer. I've attempted, for the record keeping purposes, is much more efficient to be on computer and with the cloud and to be able to do different places. But that's how I used to do it, much more comfortable that way. And I wrote up my drasha sitting in the waiting area of the manicure place.
Nail salon, yeah.
Nail salon, thank you. Got back before Yontif, everything's great, until it's time to go to shul in the morning, and I can't find my notes anywhere. And I realized that they were in my car. And when I got home, I was getting everybody out of the car, and my sefer and my drasha were, locked in the back seat of the car. So I figured, this is the perfect opening, for my drasha, that I'm going to have to wing a little bit anyway. You explain, you can't get better, at least in the women's section, than the father who took his daughters, to get a manicure on Erev Yontif. Yeah. The problem was when my daughters were walking to shul, and some 50-something-year-old men were asking to see their nails, and one of them went home and would not talk to me for the rest of the day. So I learned from that to be a little bit more selective. I actually 2 weeks ago told a story about one of my daughters, but I changed it so that it was not about one of my daughters. It was just about a teenage girl in the community, but was able to give over the story, which I thought was an incredible story. But I did not divulge that it was her. The story's about my wife; she doesn't mind, and that we're okay telling over whatever stories happened to her. But in the family, I won't do it anymore without asking them.
Yeah. So when you have a good story like that, is it let's say maybe tochen versus token? Is it are you trying to use it as filler, or do you build around the story?
Ideally build around the story, but if it's a good enough story, then sometimes that will be a token story.
Hmm.
Not completely disconnected. I really, again, that I'm not so comfortable with. I don't really know how to use the stories that well. The people that somehow every week start with some story, it doesn't have to do with anything, and then tangentially connect it. People love it. People remember it. It's just not in my wheelhouse. Not a co not a co-op that I have. But if it's a good story and I can build something around it, or it can bolster the main point, that's a home run.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
think I think I think they're great. I think also besides stories, sometimes these little vorts and the little gematria and what we go the parparos la chachma, those can also help for those things. A short vort that people will walk away with that speaks to the main point but isn't the main point. I also find is very very effective.
Yeah. So you mentioned that in the old days you used to write it out by hand. Now you use a computer. But do you write out every word, or do you write out just major ideas, or how does that work?
I usually write out every word. I usually write out every word. I try and I don't necessarily use it as such when I'm speaking, but I find that for organizing myself and timing myself, if I know that I have everything written out, I'll sometimes bold certain phrases that I want to make sure that I use. But I don't. People don't. I think, at least my impression, is that people don't have the sense that I'm reading it when I'm using it. I use it to keep me in order and to find certain key lines. But I don't. But I do try to write out. I do try to write out the entire thing, and it's much better for coming back to it later.
Yeah. So how often do you recycle? How often do you?
How public is is our conversation here? Um,
Well, people would know if you are.
mm, you would
Hopefully.
think they would know. You
Yeah.
would think they would know. I rarely recycle an entire drasha. I rarely recycle an entire drasha. Sometimes if I have, what I call drasha block, and it's, Wednesday or Thursday, and nothing seems to be coming, I'll look back at an old one, and similar to what I do with some of those svarim, look at the beginning, look at what question I addressed, and not necessarily look at which direction I took it, because sometimes, I took it in a direction that didn't have to go in that direction, and I'll see where it goes. I will also often recycle those things in other formats. I'll use that and develop it into a shear, or use it as part of another drasha. So it's very very helpful to have the notes on it.
Yeah.
Full recycling, I really rarely do.
Do you find yourself coming back to certain ideas again and again and again, certain themes?
I think so. I think they're. I believe very strongly that the goal of Rabbanus is to help people become the best version of themselves. And that was 1 week towards the very beginning. I must have only been in shul for about 6 months, and I was going to Marav one night, and somebody who I didn't know well yet, put his arm around my shoulder. He's probably 50 years old, and I don't know, 28 or whatever I was at the time, and he's like, "Rabbi, do you know why I like you?" I was like, I don't know where this is going, but I'm sure I don't want to know. And he says to me, "Because you're not afraid to get up there and give us musar." I said, "I never give musar. What are you talking about?" He said, "Well, you try to tell us what we can do to improve, and that's giving musar." I said, "Oh, if that's how you define giving musar, then yes. Yes, I try to give people, I really try to keep the messages all, for the most part, positive ones about how we can improve ourselves. And at certain times, yeah, and for that reason, I think many themes do come back to that in terms of looking inside ourselves, where areas that we personally feel we're weak or we could use some improvement.
Yeah.
That's a theme that I often come back to. There are times when I have to, when I do hit hard about certain things that I feel strongly about that I think aren't going as well. But I really try to keep the message positive. I think
Yeah.
people are much more receptive to that nowadays in general, and certainly if they're coming to shul on Shabbos, they've already done a one positive activity.
So when you started, you said you had some kind of like idea of like a model that you were supposed to fit into. What were some of the influences or the people that you saw growing up that either kind of followed their model or maybe diverged from that model?
I didn't have, I guess, a model in terms of drusha-wise, a rabbi that the rabbi that I grew up with, I always davened at Ashkama Minyan, so he actually was not the one who we usually got to hear speak.
Where was this?
This was in Jamaica States. Rabbi Hochberg was a tzaddik Yesod Olam, who I learned a tremendous amount about dealing with people and the rabbanos. And there's the person that was on the phone with me when I drove to my first levaya that I had to do, when I had to drive from the chapel to the cemetery. I was on the phone with him, and has taught me a tremendous amount. And I probably didn't take full advantage of this because I usually davened at Hashkama Minyan, and he would, I think, speak maybe once a month or something like that. It was usually Balabatim who were speaking. I never wanted to be a pulpit rabbi growing up. Once I even got interested in being a rabbi, it was much more the chinuch track. I didn't think that I would have any interest in the pulpit whatsoever. Not even positive exactly when that changed. I guess at some point during smicha, there was a bit of a change. Again, I still teach also, so we do both. But even when I decided to go into Rabbanos, it was much more to teach Torah and to reach people through the Torah.
Yeah.
I think over the years, I've just tried, every time I hear somebody who I think is good, I just try to think a little bit what they are doing and how I can use it. In terms of my approach to thinking, my Rebbeim, Rav Tursky and Rav Lachman, probably my two Rebbeim, have the biggest influence in how I think and how I look at things. But in presentation, there was no one person who I watched over the years, but I really try to learn from everybody. And whether I'm at a funeral and listening to somebody I really respect, how to give a hesped, or way for Shabbos or guest for Shabbos, whatever I can pick up, I try to learn and try to tweak. There's always more to change and more to grow.
Yeah. So again, since you brought it up, actually, Gavi Srego, who's the assistant rabbi over here in Columbus, one of the shuls, he told me to ask. He said, ask him about why he doesn't want to be the full-time or permanent rabbi. I think he's seen a couple instances where associate rabbis or assistant rabbis remain that way, and they're happy to do that. They get either their CPOC or their career track takes them in a different direction. They're happy to remain in that. And he's curious what was your rationale for that?
So when Rabbi Przansky decided to make Aliyah, the shul asked me if I was interested in taking over as the senior rabbi, head rabbi, or the like. I told them that I was, and they told me that's fine, but you have to give up your shir at YU. To which I said, I need to think about that. I'm not sure that I want to do that. And I spent a lot of
draw on your time. Was that the reason?
From their perspective, yes. Yeah, they felt that it's a large shul. We have 600 families. It is a large shul, and it needs people who are putting in a lot of time. I said to them, I think if you put the right assistants and we put the right system together, I've been here long enough. I said, I think it can be balanced. And they said no, which I respect. And I, at that point, if I would have tried to convince them otherwise, then the first time that I missed a shiva call or something, like, oh, say we told you you're too busy. I was destined for failure if I was going to push them. So that wasn't the direction that I was going to go. And I just spent a very long time speaking with my Rebbeim and my wife and other people to try and figure out what it is that I would be able to accomplish as the senior rabbi versus the associate rabbi, and what I would be giving up if I didn't give shir in YU. And after spending a nice amount of time thinking about it, the consensus from all of them was the same, was that you're not gaining much. I'm in a big enough shul where I speak every Shabbos. There's enough to do on a pastoral level, or probably more than two rabbis. So other than the kavod, and I guess certain things in terms of determining the direction of the shul. I wasn't going to be giving up. I wasn't going to be gaining much by taking that position. But I really, the coming into YU every day and giving shir and learning with the guys gives me a tremendous amount of chiyus. And giving that up was something that they all told me, not that they were telling me what to do, but when I was hearing the same thing from all of them, like, how could you give that up? And
Yeah.
that was, and I could not be happier with that decision.
Yeah. Did it ever cross your mind to find another position, a full-time position, being a rabbi of a shul, where you didn't have to give it up?
Since that time, no, no. Our shul is so large that there's really, I do more, and I've told this to people over the years when they were just doing their experience and the like. I said I see more and do more than many solo rabbis in smaller shuls.
Yeah, I imagine.
And I have the relationships. So that when I got up to explain this to the shul, my decision, which surprised many people, they assumed that I was going to want the position as the senior rabbi, and whether they knew that I would have to give up the other position or not. Said I have the two best jobs in the world, and many rabbanim would be thrilled to have either one of the two. And the fact that I have both is a tremendous, tremendous bracha, and I am thankful for it every single day. And the relationships that I have with people after 15 years is also not a small thing. And that's not, starting that over again is also a very overwhelming thought. And my wife and I have spoken, we don't really see what we would gain from that.
Yeah, great. Amazing. So tell me, this is a question I like to ask people. Tell me some of your pet peeves when it comes to drushes. Everyone has a critical eye about what they like and what they don't like.
Other people's drushes or my drushes?
No, not yours. No, other people's. Like I liken us to chefs who go to other people's restaurants. When you see someone else's dish, what goes through your mind when the ones that you don't care for that much? Obviously, no names, but
right. No, I understand. I find when people are basically just saying the same thing 3 or 4 different ways and don't have much content, that you're just wasting people's time. Now, there are times that you do sometimes need to repeat things in a different way in order for people to understand it. But if that's the only thing that you're saying, maybe there's a better way of formulating it. I feel like sometimes people dumb down the Torah because they're speaking to Balabatim and don't realize that the people that we are speaking to are just as intelligent as the people in the base medrash, and they may not have the background, but you just need to put into the right language. But you need to show them the respect of giving over and saying something intelligent. And when you're just listening to somebody, they just sound like you're saying the same thing and just filling in the time because they have to get up there. That's certainly one. And the people that say nothing. Well, sometimes just people up there and you have no idea what he said. You just he said stories and he said this and he said that. He might have quoted a pasuk. But sometimes you wonder, if you would have had to say Birchas HaTorah before you hear the drasha. I think those are the things that irk me the most. Not that I have to experience that very often, but
yeah.
I think those are the types of things that and they just speak for too long. Like, why do you have to speak for 20 minutes? If you can't say it in 12 minutes, then I don't know. You got to figure something else out. But you really need to be good and be able to make your case for why you need to speak for a very, very long time. I think it affects the davening. I think if people are in shul for too long, the davening goes downhill. It affects everything. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Get to the point and finish.
What are some of the harder speaking slots for you in a given year? You have Rosh Hashanah, you have Yom Kippur, you have let's say a hesped or a wedding, or where do you find it most challenging to craft and deliver?
about challenging. Yontif in general, Yontif I find more challenging. Sukkot is the most challenging for me, the first days of Sukkot. I think because you've been so busy with Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, getting ready for Yontif, and because there's no text. Meaning, Shabbos you can start with the Parsha. Even Pesach, you can start with the Haggadah. But Sukkot, you're kind of nowhere. And being that you're so busy and there's so much going on, the first days of Sukkot I find to be the hardest drasha of the year. Challenging the Yom Noram, I put a lot of time into my Yom Noram drashas. So challenging in a positive way. I feel like those have been some of my most impactful drashas. There are people who come to me every year Rosh Hashanah. They say, oh, do you remember on Rosh Hashanah, this many years ago when you spoke about this, and that? And that, again, besides that's, you feel great that people are, remembering and it leaves an impact. But those I really put a lot of time into. There is one area where we have it easier because we're in a very big shul, is I only need one drasha for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, because we rotate around different minyanim. So, somebody who has their own shul might have to, it's 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, and Yom Kippur, there's Kol Nidre, and Yizkor, and Ela, and I can use the same stuff multiple times. So I do have the luxury of being able to put more time into it because I don't have to come up with as many. But I really feel like those are opportunities where people are open to listening, and I try very, very hard to put a lot of thought into what to say and how to say it, and those are I think very, very well crafted because I really put a lot of time and effort into them.
Yeah. What is some, you mentioned people will recall some of your past rushes from Rosh Hashanah, and what is some of the best feedback you've gotten, and maybe some of the less savory feedback you've received over the years that stick out in your mind?
On Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, or just in general?
Yeah, whatever.
The feedback where people have told me that there have been speeches that have changed their lives, whether that's reconcile, similar to what you were saying in the opening, people that have reconciled their relationship, something that they just spoke about on Yontif, being mevater or making shalom or things like that, and the importance, and that they've been going. That's you can't get better than that. And there was a time when you speak about something as simple as Shnayim Mikra. I spoke about it, I think, 2 years ago. I don't know, it was 2 years ago. Maybe it was COVID Simchas Torah. I don't remember when it was exactly. And that somebody this past year dropped off at my house a beautiful talos with a silver atara as a gift. He told me, I just finished my 2nd year of Shnayim Mikra, and it's only because that you spoke about it. Those are things that are gratifying, because sometimes it's on the Rosh Hashanah, you're more expecting that maybe this is something which is going to last. Shnayim Mikra is the kind of thing where somebody else said to me, Rabbi, there are so many important things to talk about. Why are you wasting your time talking about Shnayim Mikra? Which did happen. It wasn't the same year. I've spoken about it more than once, but I had somebody, say that to me, like, why are you wasting everybody's time speaking about this? It's just not so. It's just not so important. I've had people that have been offended by things that I have said. Usually, it's when something is misunderstood. There's at least one time where it was not misunderstood. I just didn't think it was offensive. It was a delicate drasha about dealing with challenges and yisurim in life. And somebody who's going through, 2 people who were going through very difficult times had the opposite feedback. One person told me that it uplifted her tremendously, and one person still won't talk to me.
Wow.
Yeah.
How long ago was that?
We were in a tent, so it must have been one of the COVID, either the first COVID Yom Kippur, that was the Yom Kippur Joshua, or the Yom Kippur after that when we still had the tents.
Yeah. So how do you deal with a situation like that?
I apologized to the person and tried to explain what I was trying to do and didn't mean any offense by it. And it wasn't accepted.
Yeah.
When I insult somebody because I think I did something wrong, then it really gnaws away at me. I don't think that I did anything wrong in this particular circumstance. it's hard. You don't like the feeling of people being upset at you, and the hurt that was because of you, even unintended, and even if it probably reflects more on the challenges that they need to deal with, is hard. But at the end of the day, you can only try your best.
Right, right. Okay, so I'll ask you for my last question, something that I always ask at the end of an interview, which is, if you had two pieces of advice for a young rabbi entering into his pulpit, it could be drush related, not necessarily, but usually I'd like to start that way. But embarking on his speaking career, what would those two pieces of advice be? And again, it doesn't necessarily have to be for the drasha.
I'll stick to drasha related to drasha
Yeah.
related for now. Maybe I'll add one more that's not drasha related. I think drasha related is always try to figure out what you can do more to grow. Figure out if there's a speaking coach, if there's somebody. Don't be insulted if people give you some sort of feedback. Somebody came to me towards the beginning and offered to pay for me to work with a speech coach. I was deeply insulted. Deeply insulted. I did do it eventually, not through that person, but something else for a little bit. I think it did help a little bit, but I think it helped me be mindful that, as good as I think I am, there's probably room to improve. That same person has come to me and be like, you don't understand, you're late years away, ahead of where you were when you started, which I think is a compliment. I thought I was pretty good when I started, but I'm happy to improve. So you need to be looking to improve. Don't just be set in your ways, and don't bother getting up if you're not prepared. It's disrespectful to everybody that's there. If you have to tell people on a specific week, you know what, you get a week off. Nobody's going to be upset at you if you get a week off. But to get up when you are unprepared is, I just find it, you want to go to pet peeves, I guess you can add that to the list also. It's just extraordinarily disrespectful to the crowd. They can tell in a moment. You're fumbling around. You don't know what you're saying. You're trying to pretend that you have this, and the other thing. It's better if to just skip it, whether you need to make an excuse for yourself or not, or just tell them, I decided to give the week off. I think you're much better off. And then the general piece is you got to learn to have a little bit of thick skin, and people are going to say things that hurt you and that insult you, and usually it's coming from a place of hurt. If you need to be honest with yourself, and if you did do something, you have to take ownership of it, and you need to apologize. And there will be times that it's going to be uncomfortable, and you might not have intended it. But if it gets past that, sometimes there's going to be some people who complain and are upset no matter what you do. I think Rabbi J.J. Schachter told me, I don't remember what the numbers were, but he told me, there's a certain number of people who will love everything that you do because you're the rabbi and because that's how they grew up. And there's a certain percentage of people, and no matter what you do, they're going to hate it because you're the rabbi and that's how they grew up. Because you have to make sure to take the feedback from the people in the middle. You don't want to be swayed by the people who think everything you do is great, and you don't want to be swayed by the people who think that everything you do is terrible. But it's the normal people in the middle. That's where you need to look for feedback, and you need to find balabatan that you can trust and that you can have an open conversation with. And if somebody says something to you, that you can go back to and say, like, so-and-so said, or even without a name, I heard this piece of, like, what do you think? And, what do you think I should do about it? And have people that, a few confidants that are not necessarily the president or board or people like that, but people that you feel have your best interest, and you're not going to know that right away. But over time, I think you certainly will. And those are going to be people that are critical to success in any stellar.
Yeah. Do you find that people become more sensitive or over the years, or is it?
Maybe a little bit. Not in line with what exists in the world in the world around us.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen that so much. I think people are more open to sharing whatever's on their mind without thinking about it, certainly by text or email, things that they would never say if there was a conversation. And that's another way also, is if you have somebody who's upset at you, try to have a conversation. Because if you go back and forth by text, you or they are going to inevitably say something that is either going to be misunderstood or shouldn't have been said. But it's much harder to say those things if you're having a conversation with an actual person.
That's great advice.